very easy. The first one with Stephen, I didn't know I was going to end up having a cesarean, and that was a funny story because Grandpa was in Europe in med school, and I was very innocent, you know, although I was a college graduate, and I learned all about, you know, how the fetus develops along the way. Nobody ever told me about childbirth. So I honestly thought that they open your stomach and they take out the baby. That's what I thought happened. I never saw an animal born, and nobody ever discussed it with me, so that's what I expected. And it's funny that that's the way it ended up, that I did. So when they told me the last visit I had to the doctor that they wanted to take an X-ray, and then I said to the fellow after he was finished, well, what do you see? He said, oh, your baby's going like this, you know. And they said, well, maybe you'll have a baby tomorrow. I wrote a letter to Grandpa, which he got on the Monday, but I had not given birth because they started giving me injections to try to bring it on, and it didn't work. So he was kind of concerned because he hadn't heard yet that I gave birth. They sent me to the larger hospital, and that's where they took the baby. But I was back working 6 weeks later. I never had any problem with now with the other two, because I had to be prepared for it happening again as a cesarean. I made sure to have my hair done. Even though in those days they would put a green cap over you, and I'd say, careful, careful. I want to look good when this is over. And I had spinals, so I was really kind of half-doze and all that. And I remember that when Brian was born, I had the same surgeon each time. He'd say, hey, Block, what do you got in there, a cookie cutter? They all look the same. And I always had a nurse, you know, for at least 1 week or so come in. That was the style. It was the Jewish style, to always have somebody to take care of you. So they were easy. Well, with Elliot, it had nothing to do. Elliot was fine. They had a difference of opinion. My surgeon felt that one of the instruments was unclean and that I had a staph infection. The internist felt that they always give you an antibiotic, and with Stephen I had a penicillin. Well, they didn't, and I wasn't allergic to it, but they thought they'd do better, so they gave me erythromycin. Turns out I was allergic to all the mycins, and that's what really, but it wasn't Elliot, it was something with my own body that I went through, and so I didn't go home. You know, they took the baby home, and my sister kind of helped. And,
so isn't there a story about a sponge? A sponge?
No, not me. I don't think so, no.
Mom must be confusing those.
No, it was, some instrument, they said. But they had a difference of opinion because the internist said it was the allergy, you know. What happened is every single pore in my body split open. I couldn't bear anything against me, and even the tape, like the Scotch tape, wouldn't stay on me. And it was such a terrible itch, so they had this metal thing and they put a sheet over it, so nothing touched my body. It was terrible itch. But I came through that.
So why did you have to have the cesarean in the first place?
Because the baby was larger than I opened. And I didn't even know that was going to happen. You know, I really thought because I was very innocent about those things. I mean, I knew about the development of the fetus, but nobody ever described childbirth to me. My mother never spoke about it, so I thought it was natural they open the stomach and take out the baby. Oh, they were a lot of fun. They were a lot of fun. Brian was the most trying. I remember once, because from my kitchen window, I could see out to the psychiatric hospital. And once he got me so upset that I actually wrote a note to God. Dear God, I think that there's a bed in that hospital with my name on it waiting for me. This kid, I don't know what he had done specifically. And I put that note, I should have saved it because I put it in the drawer. And by the next morning when I looked at it, I just laughed, because I was so serious about it that he was going to drive me just crazy. But they were wonderful. They were very easy. Those were the days when, the television was the babysitter, so it was very simple to just plunk them down and I could do what I wanted, I did have a mother's helper that came in, which was very, very handy. So the mother's helper she happened to be a friend of my sister's, but she was very capable because she came from a family of 5, and so she was used to taking care of her siblings. And I would go to my friend and have some coffee, and she'd be taking care of the kids, and it was really very important. So, having them was easy.
Did you ever tell Brian or any of your sons, I hope you have a child just like you?
Oh, Brian must be the one. Yeah.
Does he?
Yeah, definitely I said that to Brian.
Does he have a child just like him?
I don't know. I have to ask him. I mean, he just...
Jason's.
But yet, I'm telling you, he was... The famous story, one of the famous stories with Brian is that Dad, he had a desk, and over the desk were these shelves into the wall, and he had his medical books on there. The desk had a rung on it, and I told the children, don't step on that, don't step on the furniture. Well, Brian did, and when he did, he tipped that first shelf, and the books came flying out. I think he might have been about 3 years old. I was so angry. Picked him up under his armpit and I slammed it down into the chair. Sit there. But as I started to pick up the books, the anatomy book, and they were really heavy, and furiously I said, do you know what would have happened to you if one of those books had landed on your head? And he said, yes, I would have gone straight to hell. Well, that cracks me up, what am I going to say when the kid says that? That was, and he said it so seriously, I would have gone straight to hell. What do you know about that? Anyway, but that was the kind of thing Brian could do. Elliot was more subtle. Elliot, when Brian was born, I thought, gee, this kid really was, because in those days we didn't nurse. We gave them a bottle in a bean bag with their heads to the side, and he really drank quite quickly until one time I happened to go past and I see Elliot in there taking the bottle out and drinking it and putting it back. Elliot liked chocolate milk, so I used to keep a bottle in the refrigerator. He'd just go and help himself. Felt like having a bottle, So Brian was the one that sent me like this. Stephen was adorable. Stephen was the one that went with us, when we went to Europe, and they had the calliope, that goes from street to street, playing music, and he would dance when it would come. And one time he found that we had a box downstairs from where we lived. He stood on the box and he lisped. He had a lisp, so he would sing. There's no business like show business like no, and the Dutch people would gather around and throw him a few pennies.
How old is
He
he?
was so embarrassed. 3, also 3. He learned Dutch very quickly, they were kids, He went to the Anne Frank school, and so he learned it. So I sent him to the corner, he didn't have to cross the street, to get some cookies. Say, and once your cookies, well, the lady thought he came in begging for cookies. She gave him a free cookie, and I was so embarrassed. I went there. He was very, very cute. I know. My brother was in the service at the time in Germany, but he came in to visit us, and he took him on they have canal boats in Amsterdam that he took him on to ride. Oh, and you know, I had wanted a son named David because of my admiration for King David, and that was going to be his name. Also, I had a cousin who was a navigator in the Air Force and was killed in the Second World War. So it was all kind of set, but that was before we knew that I was going to have a cesarean, and of course that was going to be an additional expense. And I overheard my mother-in-law say something about, sure, for the money we're good, and it stabbed me, because she felt we should name him after Charlie's grandfather, who, his father came here when he was 17. He never saw his own father again. But so his name was Shimon. And so instead of realizing I might have other children, save the David for another child, I wanted to secure that. So it was his middle name. But what happened consequently was that Charlie's family called him Steve. My family called him David. But as it turned out, he preferred the name Steve as it is. But there's still people in my side of the family that refer to him as Dovey, you know, but that generation is passing through and all that. So he's, you know, Steve. I don't know what else I could say. He was just very sweet, very cute. But Brian was the one that people always wanted to hear the latest story about what Brian said or did. Well, the big one was Stephen's, the really big one. And what was nice about it was that, you know, everybody was alive. My mother had begun her path of Alzheimer already, but she was able to be at the bar mitzvah. Unfortunately, a dear aunt of mine had died 2 weeks before, but the rabbi said since that bar mitzvah had been planned, that my father and his remaining sister were required to go to that affair because you're not allowed to spoil somebody else's simcha, somebody else's celebration. However, when they were there, they had to act almost like they were hosts. So they would take things from the smorgasbord table and bring it over to people, like they were the host and hostess. It was in a place in Scarsdale, where it called Fountainhead, and you could only have like 2 affairs going on there. But because they had made a big boo-boo, the guy that was supposed to deliver the Kiddush lunch on Saturday, truck went out to the island first, and he got back to the Bronx. You know, it was November, so the days are shorter, and the rabbi wouldn't let him in with the truck. And so when I called them, to make up for it, they gave me the other large ballroom just for the smorgasbord and one room just for the dinner. It was very luxurious. You know, the waiters wore the white gloves and all that. The opening course was duck. I remember I wanted that. And we have a wonderful album picture, because we're the last to leave, of Brian, and then the kids wore tuxedo, you know, it was black tie. It was at twilight, you know, it started at 3 o'clock on Sunday. And Brian is laying on one of the tables in his tuxedo, you know, he's fast asleep.
How old is
He
Three?
was 3.
3?
Or 3 or 3, yeah. It really was beautiful, and I had a beautiful gown. In fact, the coat to the gown, was also in this cream-colored satin. Beautiful, very, very classic with the bow down around the knee, But it had a coat to it. Everybody liked that. Very plain coat with big mink cuffs. That was really, and I wore long gloves. Elliot was at a catered place up, because by that time we lived up in Carmel, and also very formal, the same way that Brian was. Maybe not quite as luxurious as down in Westchester. Elliot chose to have his, it was around Thanksgiving, so it was a Thursday thing that we had. And Brian wanted to have his bar mitzvah lunch right after the service, so we couldn't have music, but we did have people that served, that were not Jewish, that served the hot food, And on each table, Brian's favorite color was, at that time, was orange. And my neighbor was an artist, and he made a silhouette of Brian's head, at each table. It was also very nice, but there was no music, and my brother took photographs surreptitiously, but we had to take them on a Thursday because we couldn't take pictures on Saturday, My father stayed at the Cantor's house because that was within walking distance. So when the Sabbath was over, he came to my house.
Injuries?
No,
My dad has a
wait a
scar
minute,
on
yes,
his
yes.
wrist.
But actually, Charlie was
Oh, right.
home, yeah. He was running down the hall, the long foyer of my mother's house, with a plate in his hand.
Brian?
And he felt Brian, and it broke, and he, oh my goodness, the insides in here came out, put a towel over it, and took him to the hospital, and they, stitched him up. Yeah.
Did
But
anybody
that's
break
the
any
only
bones?
time that I ever had to take any of my children. Elliot was on the varsity team in the high school football, but thankfully they never called him to play, He sat there, But Little League, and of course they were on different teams, and I had to go like from one ball field to the other ball field with them, Brian liked to run, he was a good runner. But that was about it, Stephen went to the high school, very prestigious, Bronx High School of Science. I mean, people that know, if you say that, it makes an impression because it was a special school. And that's where Stephanie went to. That's where he met her. And, but sports never entered into it. Actually, his attention was more on the music. And when he first went away to school, it was the idea to, actually, he thought he'd be a writer, But after the first year, he knew he switched to music. He went to Antioch. So it was never a sports performer, and neither were the others, I bet they did things that I wasn't aware of. Well, maybe, I think there was one New Year's Eve that they threw water balloons down outside the window. I wasn't home, to hit some young lady. I thought that was terribly cruel, hit her, aimed so it would hit, and then pulled back so she wouldn't know where it came from. That was one thing I know they did, but I don't know of any, and I'm sure there were, but they wouldn't have told me. Your father probably, but my kids never told me anything like that. As far as I knew, no, if anybody had asked me, now my kids never used any kind of, I didn't. You know, I knew he was going to do it anyway. My heart was in my mouth. I asked him to please call regularly, just so I know where he was. And it was an adventure for him. And then one day wasn't there, and the woman that cleaned told me that I had gotten a telephone call and from a 415 number, and I knew that was California. And I called up, and it was the police station. See, when he got to California, he was hitchhiking, and the policeman saw him on the highway, and asked for the ID and took him in because he was underage, and they didn't know whether he was a runaway. And what happened was my sister flew up to get him out. They had him, when I said to the policeman, do you have him in with the drunks? He said, no. He's in a cell by himself, and he's very angry. And
How old was he?
so Ricky,
How old?
I guess he was 17. You know, he also was in college when he was 16. And so when my sister flew up, it was about 5 o'clock, and they said, well, it was 5 o'clock. My sister's not me. She said, you give me that kid, you know. So they released him, and they flew back to her house. Ironically, a little bit later, that same summer, we were due to go out to California, and we met him there, and we get the newspaper, and right on the front page was a picture of that particular policeman that had picked him up. Some ride-by just shot him in the face, killed him. That same fella, you know, it was so sad, because he was so nice over the phone, you know, to reassure me. But then Brian spent the summer with Ricky that summer anyway.
Going to Vietnam. And so my dad was with 3 other people, right? There were 4 of them.
And a
Wait,
priest
he was
picked
going.
him
He was
up.
driving to
He
Vietnam.
also was picked up by a priest.
But in this, the first guy picked him up.
So he's going 90 miles per hour, wherever faster was, on the wrong side of the highway, saying, what does it matter if I die now or in Vietnam, you know, basically. And I think that was my dad and other people, they were saying, well, I think we can drop this off over here. And that was his very first ride.
At the one place, the weather was very bad, and I think it was in Chicago, and they were at a construction site, and the guy took pity on them, and he let them, he says, but go early in the morning, you know, before anybody comes to work. They let them stay in the little house that they usually have at the construction site, so that's where they stayed. And he lost something, we had to replace a backpack, I think. Oh my goodness, Stevens, of course. Stephen got married January the 4th, and there was a blizzard. Morty and Sandy weren't there because she had some pneumonia, and this was at night. And Elliot, I think Elliot was sure. I think Elliot was there. But what happened was, we all get to the synagogue, and it's closed. There was nobody there. And there's Stephanie in the wedding gown. Stephen wore a suit, but she had a wedding gown that Rosemary had gotten for her. And we didn't know what happened. The place was locked. And Charlie's brother, he rest in peace, his sister, and father were there, and we're keeping the motors going in the car because it was very cold. And then Stephanie and Stephen go to the first house they could to make a telephone call to the rabbi to find out what's happening. And the first house they go to, and there she is in the wedding gown, they were sitting shiva. You know what that is? These people were sitting shiva. In comes the bride and groom. But they called, and it turned out that he was at one of the airports waiting for a coffin to come in. So, Everything was late, but we got in there and people were very helpful. They made tea because Stephanie and Stephen made their own wedding. They brought up cheesecake and strawberry shortcake from Ratner's. It was, and they had champagne. You know, Stephanie's Jonathan was there. Rosemary, of course, was there, and she had a couple of friends that were there. You know, but the rabbi called him when he was saying who was, you know, he called him David, and I was beside because I didn't want Charlie's family to think that I had done something, you know. So that, of course, it happened then. He corrected himself that it was Stephen, yeah. Elliot was here. I came like a guest. All I did was, there was a rehearsal dinner, and it was difficult in Orange County for them to find a kosher place, of course, because my father was alive then, you know. It had to be kosher. And so we paid for that rehearsal dinner, but the wedding was at Newport Beach Hotel. It wasn't kosher, but they didn't serve ham or shrimp, but Elliot and my father had these TV dinners, kosher TV dinners, brought in specially, you know, for them, yeah. The rest of us ate the chicken. And it was a great party. And we have the movie, and my father is dancing, you know. It was a great party. We stayed there, and it was a very rainy day. It was Christmas Eve. And of course, it was a Saturday night, and Elliot at that time was very observant. He would not move until the Sabbath was over, and then first he had a shave. So we're all at this temple that the Goldsteins belong to, and her father is pacing back and forth, because he had to wait for Elliot. And but it was a very nice reception, although her father to this day wonders if I was in collusion with the photographer, because the photographer was dancing with me. I'm in the film, for most of the film, and he paid for it. Every year, Elliot and they did this year too. Every year they look at that. Oh, Brian's wedding. Well, that was a very special case because when Debbie's father, may he rest in peace, wanted a girl very badly because the one girl they had ended up as a crib dad. And so he insisted, and Florence had 3 more children in order to get that girl. And that was his dream for his daughter's wedding. So Florence was going to spare no expense for this wedding to honor her husband's memory. And it was beautiful. Florence really wanted it to be at the Beverly Hills hotel, but Debbie did not want it that way. Debbie felt she wanted it at the place where they had met, at some singles thing, at
Stephen Weiss.
Stephen Weiss, yeah, the Stephen Weiss. So it was beautiful. My brother-in-law, Michael, gave me some good advice. He said, you know, this lady is going to spare no expense, because normally the groom pays for the flowers and the liquor and the clergy, yeah. But the meal is the bride's side. But Michael said, you have to tell her that you can spend a certain amount of money. That's it. And that's what you had. That was fine with Florence. Whatever I gave her was fine. And it's just that Brian found out just the flowers alone were $8,000. It was incredible. Well, you can see it on their wedding. The flowers were just tremendous. I mean, she had flowers around the room that was 6 feet tall. It was beautiful. So much so that at the end of the wedding, I mean, people couldn't fit it in the car. My sister took home arms full of flowers. So it was beautiful, but she wanted there to be flowers. It was our last child to get married and her last two. Anyway, so we wore the crowns. Everybody danced around us. It was very, very nice ritual. And it was just beautiful, everything about it. It was a very happy occasion, and, I love the toast that Elliot and Stephen made for their brother. It was fun. It was really great. Florence did a beautiful, beautiful job. She was a wonderful woman. I was very lucky in that my daughters-in-law, mother, and I always got along. If I had lived in California, I probably would have been very close especially with Florence. We really had great respect for each other. Florence was a wonderful woman.
Did you think Stephen and Stephanie were crazy for homeschooling?
No.
That's not on the script.
Yes, it is.
Oh, is it?
No, I really didn't. I admired her and I understood it. I understood her desire to do it, and certainly I saw the results, And Stephanie is such an honest person. She said she realizes not every parent is equipped to be a teacher. Not all of them can do it. And in fact, in her case, she felt maybe 2 of the children might have benefited in certain ways from going to a public school. Although I don't know about the public school system here in New Mexico, how well they could have done. And we all know who those 2 children are. Well, I knew that, first of all, I was innocent about it. He just came to tell me he was getting married when, after. I knew he was seeing somebody. He had come back from Stanford, and her name was Baker. Well, Baker could be Jewish, I didn't ask any questions. And when I knew about it, he had already made up his mind. I think my father would have liked me to have tried the technique of telling him I'd disown him. But I couldn't do it because I wouldn't go through it. I didn't want to lose my son. And I felt that she had to be extraordinary, that he wouldn't want to, that he wanted to marry her that much. And I felt that she had to feel the same way too, because she was of a different faith. What really bothered me was the hurt my father felt, because we knew the children would not be Jewish. That's why when Stephanie went down to the diocese at St. Patrick's in Manhattan, they had no problem with his getting married, as long as it was in a, in a synagogue, not outside on the street, or on the beach or something like that. Because they knew the law too, and they knew that the children would all be Jewish. They didn't care that much. So he was married in the Scarsdale Reform Synagogue. I think he might have been a bishop that Stephanie knew was there in attendance. He didn't do anything as far as Catholic ritual was concerned. So it was a Jewish ceremony. And Stephen knew he did not invite my father, because that would have been like an offense, So he didn't. But, and she was a very nice girl, I'm very glad I did what I did. And to this day, I have usually Jewish people that say they admire me for what I did. And I don't think I did anything. My father loved me very much, and he wouldn't hurt my feelings, you know. But I know that it was a big, big disappointment to my father. And along the way he kept saying, what's going to be with those children? What are they going to be? And I knew they were going to be Catholic, and I just let him ask it as if it were a rhetorical question. When I thought to myself, Papa, you know that they're Catholic. That's it. They're going to be Catholic. And I'm over and over again, I felt, because of my relationship with God, that there had to be a reason that God planned for these two people to be together, and I wasn't going to interfere. And I've never regretted my decision. The only thing I did say, I remember, to Stephanie, my concern, and this is before she, when they were first married and they came, visited us. My concern, because I know there are people that think that way, is that my children, my grandchildren, will think that I'm going to go to hell because I'm not Catholic. I don't want them to feel that way, And she said, you'll never have to worry about that. And boy, she was certainly right. And that was my concern. I don't want them to think I'm going to go to purgatory or hell because I don't believe in Jesus. And she reassured me about that. And when Stephen became Catholic, and he never told me, but of course as soon as I went to Philip's wedding, I knew right away because he went up to receive communion. I felt that he did the right thing because he loves this woman and she loves him, and they want to be together for eternity, and that's fine. It gave me also another perspective to see it in another religion's liturgy. And I remember looking and saying, hey, we say that too.
Yeah. Or another way.
A lot of it was really involved with my feeling for my father.
Yeah.
See, once Papa was gone, it changed. I could feel differently.
Yeah.
But of course, it was obvious when I went. I understood that he was uncomfortable with bringing it up, that it would just naturally flow, and it did at the wedding. It was just, I know how much being married to your mother made a difference in my son's life, and what a positive force she was. And he loves her, and she loves him, and so naturally, the big thing is for there to be peace. Something in a house that was right. And when the time would come, many years from now, they could be buried next to each other. There's no question in my mind. Doesn't make him any, if anything, I respect his belief. I respect it. And he's always shown that he's never forgotten where he came from. Because he was, Dad wore the scissors when he was 14, up until the time he was 14 years old. He really believed in his, faith. So he just went further, that's all. And we're still in the dark ages, But whether we'll ever find out, I don't know. But what I do know is that spiritual feeling of belief in a God and a commitment to his teachings.
Yeah.
That's what's important to me. You know, obviously there are differences. We don't believe in saints. We believe that there are people that are saintly, but not, to believe in a saint where you light a candle for them to help you in certain causes. I respect that other people feel that way, but we don't have anything like that. And certainly when you look in the history of our heroes, whether it was Saul or David or Solomon, they did many, many immoral things, many, for which they paid too. They did pay for it. So they lived good, kind, generous lives, Stephen and Stephanie. And I'm very, very grateful. She's just super duper. But I'm telling you, way back I said to him, I didn't feel that when Stephen married Mom, he was trying to rebel. I knew that he found someone and he didn't want to let her go. He didn't know if he'd fit. And that could have been too. May have never found anybody of that caliber. She also marrying. I had said that to her. Why do you want to marry somebody that's not of your faith? And her answer was simply, because I love him. Hey, I can't fight that. Because I love him. I mean, she was so strong in her faith, but not to the point where she would marry somebody if he weren't, I guess it's just simply a matter of numbers. Their concern was that, they marry. Well, you can do that by just not going to church and doing the things you're supposed to, but that weakens the faith. That's my feeling about it. I'm very happy with them, and very happy to see that it's gone through to their children. And I definitely into the children's. I look at all of them are being taught to continue it. Whether it's Dominic, I see it in Dominic and Benedict. You'll see as you get older. There'll be a few rebels along the way, because only by the numbers, But maybe not. I hope very little that there won't be one that strays that way. I don't know. What's going to be is going to be. God rules over all, whether they believe it or not. It rules over all. It's going to be.
Well, I mean, I just know for myself, I really appreciate having the Jewish heritage, and
it makes it that much more interesting, to see. And actually, it's the extension. It's that the prophecy, believing that the Messiah did come, that you accepted that, and you might be absolutely right. I've said also kind of facetiously in a way, if I had been born Catholic, I would have been a wonderful Catholic. It just happens that I was born Jewish, not only Jewish, born to a Levite.
Yeah.
Now there's a brand. They feel that once you get married, you lose that, but I refuse to let go of that. My father was a Levite, and I'm a Levite.
Well, I know it doesn't go through the mother, but I think Nathaniel really appreciates that he has Levite blood somehow in him.
Because it's very interesting, because they were the ones that, had assisted the priest and wrote the music and sang. They were not allowed to own property. They had to live They lived in the temple, and they were supported by the community in terms of their food and their clothing and their son. That's it. But their job was in the temple. But they were involved a great deal in the music of the temple.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to me, looking in my own family, how many of the family were musical
Yeah.
on my father's side. My mother was, they were all Israelites. But, you know, how many in the family turned out to be so musical?
Mm-hmm.
And it's gone through down to Morty's grandchild.
Yeah.
And his son. I shouldn't leave out Stuart, you know, his son. But I remember when Stuart was a little boy, how he would, they would put on the classical music and he would conduct the music.
Yeah.
He had that in him then. No, I have wonderful stories about my great-grandchildren. Probably more there. I think that's been wonderful for me. Grandchildren, now great-grandchildren. I mean, how can I complain? God's been so good to me, you know, for me to live to see this. I'm very grateful to that. But we made it our business. Those were the years that, you know, we went as often as we could to Stephen. And kids were wonderful. I have wonderful memories of walking with Isaac, who had to be, I don't know how old you were when you were in Rochester, walking with the dog early in the morning. Those were special. That was our time, you know. They were all so wonderful. I loved coming to New Mexico. I mean, it's through them I got to see these places. I would have never, you know, people go all over the world on vacation. It would never occur to me to go any place but to my grandchildren. And, you know, throw in my sister on the way, too, and see her. But I loved when we would come to New Mexico, Stephanie allowed me to rent a TV. Mm-hmm. That was fun. But it was always to be returned, you know, when I would go back to New York. I love going to the library with them. I love seeing the shows they put on for Christmas. Oh my. I remember sister sitting in the little rocking chair because she was Mary, and the angel Gabriel came to tell her that she was, and she's sitting like cross-legged in this rocking chair and saying, "But I know no man." And I forget, there was one costume that had a long trail behind it, I remember. They were just wonderful. Oh, yes, because those were the days, you know, going back, when you could come right to the gate. Mm-hmm. And I remember coming in to Albuquerque and walking out from the plane, and there are these kids, bubba, 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 you know, because there were, you know, 7 of them. And people at the airport turning around, some people smiling because they understood the name Bubba, which means grandma. And one time they came with bags over their heads and, you know, for that little.
Monkey masks.
One time it was lovely. It was, I don't know where they lived then, but they came to the airport and it was Christmas time. And as I walked out the door, they all were singing in harmony the Christmas carols. It was really lovely, you know. I'm very grateful that our situation was such that we were able to come in every year, or sometimes twice a year, but at least around Christmas time we came. Sometimes Charlie couldn't leave the office, you know, as I would go myself, and then he would meet me here. But we always had a good time. Oh yeah, because she gave birth in bed in her own house, and then my rabbi came down with us and to perform, to do the ritual part, and Grandpa performed the circumcision.
Was it exactly 8 days?
Huh?
Was it exactly 8 days after the birth?
Yes, absolutely.
Can you talk about the circumcision?
Then he had to come back and do a repair job. Then, but
I
Philip,
hear there's a lot of alcohol involved too.
Point at Colleen.
I can't even imagine. Did you watch? No, did
no,
Stephanie
no,
watch?
no.
Or are they not allowed to watch?
Well, I could have, but no, I didn't. I just stood in the room. I didn't want to watch. But it was such a joy, my first grandchild, you know. And I was still in my 40s. Oh my gosh, was I proud.
And the yo-yo.
Isaac?
And the yo-yo.
Oh, I love that story. Actually, we were about to give a car to, one of our cars, to Stephen. And so a friend of mine drove one car and Charlie out, the one we were going to give him. And we met them in Hershey, Pennsylvania.
Oh.
They came up from Pittsburgh, so it was, I don't know, it was halfway, but it was closer. And we stayed at a motel overnight. But we went to eat in a little restaurant. And at the counter where the cashier was, they had a few articles in the showcase. And one of them was a yo-yo with the word Hershey on it, you know. There's Isaac pressing his nose against the glass, and I'm saying, "Would you like that?" He said, "Yeah." So, or maybe he said yes. And my girlfriend was standing there. She said, what do you have to get that for him? He doesn't even know what it is." And I said, "Isaac, do you know what it is?" He says, "Just get it." Just get it. So I did. And sure enough, he pulled it like off the floor. He really didn't know what it was. But it was just, would I deny him anything? You know, that's the story of Isaac. Philip would always, I don't know. I was telling the story to, I think, actually, who did I tell? One of your kids today, Thomas, that one of the times that I came up, when they lived here in Albuquerque, they had like a pet rat, it was a white one.
Rats.
And those stinkies, you know, they purposely let it loose in my bedroom. This thing scouting around, just to hear me. Actually, Isaac was an instigator about a lot of things. One of the things they did was put a recorder in the room where I was. At that time, I was doing a lot of concerts, so I would practice. But what they did was put it on high speed. So when you listened to it, it came out like Minnie Mouse. They really were one. I'm trying to think. You know, the girls would never do anything untoward. It was the boys that try to look, you know, they do things to surprise me, so to speak. But they were always a delight, you know. When they were a little older, once it had to be, I guess, when Brian got married, and they were in Los Angeles. Never forget that. So we went to the Getty Museum, and we're getting off the elevator, and either Isaac or Philip say to them, "Our grandmother needs a wheelchair." I didn't need a wheelchair, and I didn't want to embarrass them or whatever. So they take me back in the elevator to go up, and then they walk out the door and leave me in the wheelchair. You know? And it wasn't one that you could move yourself in. You needed somebody to push. Okay, so they got in, and time got me out. And then they're running all over the place with this thing, like madmen. You know, nobody stopped them. But, or they'd leave me in the middle of a room. You know, they do that. My sweethearts. I have a lot of stories I could recall about them. I remember them going on the ditch, you know, when there was water there.
Walks with Chessie, the golden retriever.
Well, they had this wonderful dog, and when they moved to Chicago, they moved to a place that didn't allow pets. And so we took the dog,
Oh.
with the understanding that if they ever moved, which happened when they moved here, we would bring Jessie with us. And she was lovely. I had promised, I hated to give her up. She was a lovely, sweet, lovely dog, and she gave them a few more years of joy. Beautiful dog. But, oh, sister, you know, the day that I would arrive, we went right to the rental place because I wanted to rent a TV. And Stephanie was very specific because the day that I was leaving, it had to go back. You know, if I were going to be there for 3 weeks, we'd have it 3 weeks. And, you know, we watched to make sure that they saw things that were suitable. But it always struck me that sister would go to her bedroom and, you know, they had a bunk bed, she was up on the top, and read a book. All the other children were there to see that, but she didn't. The only thing she got involved in is that when a friend of mine used to give me like $5 or so to go get candy. And then she would be involved. Actually, when I think of it, it was Rebecca that would pick out the assortment. And then come home and act like Lady Bountiful. This is for you. This is for you. She chose what she was going to give them. Oh, I actually, there was a little part of me that regretted that they wouldn't have a family, you know. But actually, I'm very admiring of the fact that they want to give that kind of service to their community. I'm really very proud of that they made that choice. And I think in their cases, it was the right thing for them. I mean, this little girl who, when asked what she wanted to do for her 5th birthday was Chuck E. Cheese, grows up to be Sister Teresa. And she's made me very proud of her. My friends back east look at that channel, you know, when she was teaching, you know, doing that.
Any story about Jessica?
Which one? Well, I just remember that Jessica was the one that was when we went to Hawaii. We took Stephen and Jessica with us. And it was really Jessica, I never would have done it, who wanted to, in one of the valleys there, famous one, wanted to go horseback riding. I'd never been on a horse, you know. But they're specially trained for the tourists and all that. So because of Jessica, we actually went horseback riding at the valley there in Hawaii. But it was a group of people. So one goes behind the other.
Yeah.
Grandpa gets the horse that doesn't want to move. And of all things, they say, well, just switch him at behind. Well, Grandpa's going to hit a horse, you know. So the guide would go back and give the horse a jolt and he'd go. The funny thing is, as we got closer, when we were on the way back, that horse suddenly, you know, he smelled it was food at the other end, really got going. But it was because of Jessica, and I enjoyed it. I never would have gone on my own, but Jessica was provocative. I wish we weren't there, you know, long enough to have gotten every one of my grandchildren with us there, because it was a lovely place, really nice. No, just that she was always like the life of the party. You know, she was always, that's my remembrance of her, always being happy and joking, yeah. And Nat's going to be a wonderful parish priest. I think those people that will come under him will be very fortunate. I think because he has a sense of humor. I mean, he is strict, I know. He is strict about certain things. He's not flexible, but he does have a sense of humor, and it's quick. And it does a lot to comfort people, you know. I'm really very proud. That's how I feel about it. I'm very proud of the fact. I mean, I should have it, you know.
you remember when you and Nat and I would stay up till like 2 o'clock?
Oh, I
in the morning
love
discussing
that. Oh, yes.
philosophy, and we would pray together. We would read your little.
That's right. Oh, that was what,
Yeah.
my goodness, we'd say them sometimes till 2 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
But it helped because it's not like you had to get up early to go to school
Yeah.
or someplace, so we could sleep a little later, the next day. Oh, yes, I look forward to it. It was very, because it was very personal. It was just us.
Yeah.
Nobody else was involved, no other older person to put in their 2 cents, I really liked that. I also very much enjoyed that you guys would decorate our room at this time of the year and sensitively stick in something, a 6-pointed star here and there, and sometimes frost the window, with those decorations, and with the little lights, so it made it, we could see where we were going. Those were very special years. It wasn't just one year that we did that. Stories. I did try, and I didn't know how far I got, to bring them to New York as when they were 10 years old, and do things with them in New York. But that's kind of vague in my memory, except for Ben, because when he came, we went to visit Rosemary. I remember in her quaint house that she has, which is a landmark house. I don't know if you know that. It's a landmark house in Huntington, yeah. Oh, but by the way, what I do remember is when the girls came, I remember taking them to the theater. Once we went to the Secret Garden. I don't know which one of the girls saw that. It might have been Jessica. I forget the other one. What I remember about Aaron is, because Elliot and Eileen worked, and he went to school, but he was off for the Christmas around no, it was the Hanukkah vacation. They were to be, so I would come out to them and babysit, not with Grandpa, and we would take a walk from where they lived to the college area. It wasn't that far, and we'd go on a treasure hunt. So on the way, this little boy was picking up stuff, a pebble, a nice shiny pebble or something that we'd see on the way. And I was thinking of this today when Benedict, expressed an idea to have a treasure box,
No, yes.
and what he considered treasures. Jacob was always a very quiet boy, and what I remember about Jacob is really as a high school, because that's when we moved out here, and one of my duties was to pick him up at school. And although he was very quiet, when we were alone in the car for the 5 minutes or whatever that it took to get to the house, and when I asked him a question, he really did talk. And it was very special. It was our time. Nothing was interrupting his and mine. And I never knew how it affected him, except that I can see now when I'm with him, and it isn't that often, he's at college, the way he hugs me, I can feel he has a good feeling about me, and I'm glad I left him with a good impression. Jacob is very sweet. Always calls me on my birthday. Oh, Jason. Jason, who loves to tease me and say, that I'm your favorite. I said, I can't say that, Jason. Each one is my favorite in a different way. But you don't have to tell anybody else. But you and I know that, don't we? He likes to think that he's my favorite. I love those. Because you're going to ask about Alexis, too. They're very special to me. Very special kids. And they show me, that they care about me a lot, too. So, on the other hand, I have a grandson that's very involved with Jewish affairs, going in that direction, too. And I'm very proud of him making that choice. Because we need it, the younger generation, to be aware of the fact.
Do you remember the birth of your last grandchild?
Yes, I do, because I came out to California. You know, Debbie wanted to have me. Oh, yes. And I remember distinctly Debbie saying to me over the phone, I have a daughter, but she is the youngest. And then start coming the weddings and the great-grandchildren, and they're just wonderful. I mean, the only thing I'm sorry that it's tough to get everybody together again at the same time. I'm very fortunate in that respect, I must tell you, because my sister's children behave as if I'm their grandmother. The way they act toward me, I'll never forget when at Ian's wedding, when we were sitting and having our dinner, he came over and he said, come with me, Aunt Goldie. And he deliberately wanted a photograph by the photographer just of he and me. They've always, each one of those children have made me feel very special and not just an ordinary aunt. But I have to admit to you, you know what, when I think of my brother's children, they act the same way toward me. And it's very gratifying to get that feeling. I know that when I lived back east, you know, and the Jewish holidays came up, it was usually in my house. And they would come, and they have a lot of memories of fun times that we had together. I also took them. Yeah, we take them to the ballet, the girls anyway. That's true. But each one of them, even Stuart, I've been very fortunate having that kind of love from my nieces and nephews also. And they transmitted it to their children, so they think Aunt Goldie is somebody special. In their lives, I was. And I think that probably goes back to the way my brother and I felt about me and my sister felt about me. And that's why family is can be so important, positively and negative, but positively. You don't realize how much you give your children in that respect. And that's not something that can be bought in the store, you know. It's wonderful. That's a good place to stop. What?
You realize the camera's on right now.
Oh my gosh. Well, you're going to have to edit that out.